My name is Kim Sigle, and I'm from Reston, Virginia. And I chose to read from George today because this book was actually my first encounter with what censorship really meant. We had ordered the book for our library when it was newly published, and a hold was put on it for some unknown reason. And it turned out that a group of parents were protesting the addition of the book to our school libraries, to the elementary school libraries. And I was shocked and surprised. I, of course, knew that there were banned books. I'd read about it and heard about it, but it was my first real experience with someone trying to stop me from sharing books with students. It was suggested that maybe we keep these books in the library office, but if I have a student who's trying to figure out if they're transgender or not, I don't think they're going to come and approach me and ask me to see a book that's locked away in my office. So a group of other librarians and I really went and talked to the superintendent of our schools and made sure that it wasn't stopped. We went through all the correct channels to make sure that this book got on all of our shelves. So I'm very proud of the fact that it's a book that I have in my library. Eventually, Mrs. Udell came to announce that it was time for the boys to take their turns. Robert was first and came back bragging, "Beat that, number 2." But George wasn't worried about the boys. Her competition was already back in their seats, writing definitions for words. Finally, the 5th boy, Chris, went out into the hallway. He was a chubby white kid with a toothy grin. He returned with a smile wider than ever and danced victoriously back to his seat. Then it was George's turn. In the hallway, Mrs. Udell sat in the blocky wooden chair, the one that matched her blocky wooden desk. The chair looked awkward without its mate. "You don't have your sheet, George," Mrs. Udell said. "Don't need it." "Well, that's a good sign. It means you must have practiced." Mrs. Udell gave a kind smile. "But do speak up." Before Miss Udell could say anything else, George closed her eyes and began. The first words rushed out of her mouth, but then she slowed into the cadence she had practiced. She felt herself as Charlotte and gave each word her full attention as it left her tongue. The words felt even more like hers than they had in Kelly's room. George reached the end of Charlotte's monologue and was ready for the dialogue with Wilbur that followed. But George didn't hear her cue. She opened her eyes. Mrs. Udell was frowning, and a thick crease had formed across her forehead. "George, what was that?" she asked. I started George, but there were no words to finish the sentence. Was that supposed to be some kind of joke? Because it wasn't very funny." "It wasn't a joke. I want to be Charlotte." George's voice sounded much smaller now that she was speaking with her own words.